Welcome back to Open Line. We are talking about A Season to Remember. This is a program that's coming up that honors the families of victims of violent crime. It happens every year. The governor attends. We are happy to have with us Tina Fox, Director of Victim Services for the Tennessee Board of Parole, and also Delores and Phillip Robinson, who are sharing their remarkable story. So Delores, again, your husband was murdered, Phillip, your dad, back in 1986. You all have now forgiven the two people who did this. And I want to ask you, Delores, so you just recently went and asked the parole board, said, we forgive these individuals, which is unusual. What did people think when you said, we're going to go and ask that they get out?
Well, they didn't. They would just look at me like they thought, hey, she's lost her mind. Because I would be talking, they'd say, whatever happened to them? And I'd say, well, you know, one of them is already out, but next week we go to another one's hearing. And that, and she said, well, I hope they, you know, lock him up and keep him there forever. And I said, oh no, I don't feel that way. My son and I are going to go and speak at the parole hearing for him to be let, you know, go. And she looked at me, and there's been several people that have asked me this. And over the years, and when I'd say, you know, that we were for them getting out, they just don't say much of anything. They just stare. They really just stare at me and say, like, I don't believe you. But anyway, as I said a while ago, though, it's really a relief to forgive these people and let them, after 30-something years now, they are back home and they are living a normal lives. I guess how you can live a normal life after you've been in prison for all these years. But anyway, it's a big relief for me. It really is. And it didn't come overnight. Oh my goodness, no.
So they spent a long time in prison, but it took a while for you to get to this point.
Yes, very definitely.
How long do you think? When?
Well, I've been a Christian since age 12. Knew about the forgiveness verses, but Thomas Jefferson is famous for having cut out parts of the Bible that he didn't like. I didn't go to that much trouble to get out a penknife and do that, but I was ignoring those scriptures, wrestled with them, and then just kind of set them aside because I didn't have enough to do that. I didn't trust God enough, to be quite honest. So I distinctly remember it was May of 1994. I was mowing the yard and picking up some sticks that had fallen from an old tree, and just finally got so tired of carrying the weight of these two men on my back, and sat down on a mower and released them. Told God, I said, I don't like this, but I'm going to trust you with it. I hope these men, if they aren't Christ followers, become Christ followers. And God, I don't understand all this, but if you have us worshiping you side by side in heaven forever, I'm going to trust you with that. And so that really just sat right there, because I'm not cut out of material to write a letter to a murderer and say, I've forgiven you, when they've denied it, and they're still in the appeal process at this point in time.
Right.
So it wasn't until Ron wrote a letter in 2007 that we started to correspond with one another.
How much, what is your biggest takeaway from that correspondence? What are some of the things that stand out the most? Obviously, he admitted to it, as you said, but even deeper than that, what are some of the things that kind of stand out to you?
Well, he acknowledged that he was under the influence of crystal meth, would do anything to get it, and it really had taken over his life. He'd been addicted for almost 2 years. And that was the purpose for the robbery, was to get money to buy a bag of meth. And in 1996, he became a Christ follower, but he still had trouble with accepting forgiveness and forgiving himself. And he says he heard this still small voice. He says, you need to confess to the Robinson family. And so that's what he did in 2007. And really, I guess he became more human at that point. We'd granted him his humanity when we'd forgiven him, but still, he became more three-dimensional for us. And he really went from being Hammer to Ron Hammer. He got a first name out of that.
And how do you reconcile this with I guess, you know, your dad, your husband, how do you think he would feel that you all went, again, all these years later and said, okay, release these people? What about that?
Well, my understanding of the Bible is, as a Christ follower, he's in heaven and in Christ. And so however Christ feels about it, that's how my dad feels about it. So I believe that he's also for that. Yeah.
I definitely agree that Wayne would be for us doing what we have done and speaking on their behalf at the parole hearings. Or I couldn't have done it if I didn't really believe in my heart that Wayne would have wanted these men forgiven. I mean, it's amazing how your thoughts run at that time. Well, even some members of my own family asked me how I was, you know, how was I going to deal with this if they did, you know, get released, and are you sure that you're doing the right thing? And I had to explain to them once again, it's just amazing how much better. Actually, now, as I said, it took years before I could even think about forgiving them, because I mean, to go through the trial, and it was a long trial, and then to hear him look directly at me and say, you know, I'm sorry, but I did not kill your husband. And those words kept ringing in my ears, you know, even when the parole hearings all came up, and he told his story to the parole board of how this all came down. This is where Miss Fox was so terrific to me, because he told exactly how it happened. It's the first time I had actually heard out of his mouth what happened that night on the sidewalk, and I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. And she put her arms around me, and she was so comforting. I mean, I can't say enough nice things about her. She's been terrific through all the parole hearings and all of this. But anyway, I feel like we've all come a long way.
Yeah, I bet. And so Tina, you go to lots of parole hearings. You help lots of people. How unusual is this?
It is highly unusual. We hear, the Board of Parole hears about 1,500 cases a month, and every case has a victim. And we are inundated with victims and victim family members attending parole hearings in opposition of the offender's early release. And so when Mrs. Robinson called and advised that she wanted to be in support of the offender's release, it took me back. And in victim services, we have this mantra that we don't judge. It is what it is. And so parole hearings are open to the public. She is a registered victim with us, and so she was afforded an opportunity to come and voice her concerns. And so there are a raft of legal factors that the parole board members must review and consider. And the victim's voice is a legal voice, a legal factor. It is not the determining factor, but it is a factor that must be reviewed and considered. And obviously, it was reviewed and considered.
So in other words, if a victim's family comes forward and says, I wish that so-and-so be released, that's not, the parole board doesn't have to release them, and it doesn't mean necessarily that the person would be released, but they consider that. That's an important consideration.
Yes, sir. It is a legal factor that they must review and consider. Again, it's not the determining factor. There are legal factors such as education, disciplinary infractions, the length of sentence, how long they have served. The list goes on and on and on. And support of the offenders, opposition of the offender, goes on and on and on. There is not necessarily one identifying factor that could determine release or not, but there are factors that must be reviewed and considered.
All right, we're going to take a break. Then we're going to get some phone calls. I think Ann has been holding for a while. Hold on there. If you want to call in, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.